I mean, I wish I'd known what I back then, what I know now about learning. But what I've really discovered, thanks to the great work of researchers in learning, is that slower learners like me can be just as good and sometimes even better than the race car kind of learner. And that we bring real advantages to the way we learn, to our new disciplines that we are learning. So I just love being able to convey the ideas about how you can learn effectively, whether you're a race car or like me, a hiker.
I love the distinction that you make between two different paces of learning. And I watched some of your Coursera course, which is really fascinating, and how there are two different kinds of learners, or say different speeds at which people learn, and one is not necessarily better than the other. So there are many listeners or parents who are listening and thinking of their teens who wonder what marks a slow learner, and maybe what positives we could take from separating learning speed from learning efficacy.
I think a challenge for all parents, and this includes me, with we have two of our own children, and two who we adopted as they were older, Kosovo refugees. And what what can be difficult to understand is that youth may think a child is just blowing things off and not really, just making your life difficult, when actually it's their life that can be difficult. And here's what I mean. Let's say you have just a little subtle difference in the genetics of your dopamine neurons. If you don't really have adequate amounts of dopamine squirted out, you know, uh, what happens is normally people can focus and then they kind of relax their brain. They go into what I call diffuse mode, but it's default mode network, task negative network, where your mind wandering, right? So you do this when you go for a walk or you're sitting in class being bored and your mind wandering. Well, people with that subtle little difference in dopamine, they what happens is when they focus, it also brings up that mind wandering. So they can't help it. It's like so easy for them to, whoa, just sort of take their mind off of something and wander off doing something else. Now, with individuals who have, for example, ADHD, they can focus and they can hyper focus, but only in what they're really interested in. And that's the difficult thing for parents. It's like, well, make yourself be interested in this. It's a little tough to do if you don't see the long-term upshot and benefit for yourself of, sitting and learning the multiplication tables, for example. But the the bottom line that I've found through the years is a lot of times I think parents don't get credit for the fact that good learning can take place through just years of helping encourage on a day-to-day basis, do your homework, do your practice. Nobody comes up to you and says, great job as a parent. Oh, attaboy. That's just such a wonderful thing that you're doing. Because it's like this sort of dull droning day by day encouraging. But this is a valuable way to help students or children who are maybe a little slower. That's what we did with our children. And it worked like a charm, even when they struggled with math and science. One she just recently finished her medical school residency at Stanford, and the other finished did her undergraduate in studio art and her master's in statistics. So, that little bit of, I don't want to every
All that
day.
consistent support over
Right.
time had an impact. I mean, you're talking about habit building, and we know that habit building is really important for anyone to master anything. And like slow learners, you're describing a biological model where, it's like what one of the things that causes a person to learn more slowly than another is something that they can't control. It's just the way we're
The
all
biology.
wired, right? Like some of us who are fast learners in some ways, we take for granted when something comes easy to us. It's something comes readily to us, like we did something right. No, we were just born that way.
Exactly right.
But there's some deliberation. And one of the interesting things I think you're mentioning too is just there's some motivation, right? Like, because if learning feels hard, it's really easy with a lack of maturity to turn away from that. Like, oh, I'm not interested in it. I don't want to do that. So there is this element, like you said, especially as parents, encouragement, providing whatever resources, whatever tools you can, so that you help to facilitate it, even if it might be being done at a slower pace.